Welcome to the new season of Love Thy Number. I am so excited to share stories from people who are loving the gift of their own Enneagram numbers. I'm Danae King. I'm a Type 7, and I'm so happy to host this conversation with you. Good morning, friends. I want to take just a minute to explain what this podcast episode is about and the two that will follow this one. So the next 3 podcasts are going to be a recording that Doug and I did for the International Enneagram Association Georgia chapter. And we spoke on the evolution of love using the maps of spiral dynamics and the Enneagram and how we think these two maps just work beautifully together. So we start off a little silly in the beginning. Hang in there and you'll see where we're going. And then in this one in particular, Doug does a really good high-level overview. You really can't do much in explaining such a complex map in such a short amount of time, but it's a really good introduction. And so this one, we go over that, Doug does, and then we go more into how we see love evolving through the worldviews of each particular level on the spiral, and then we relate that how love has evolved in our own growth through our Enneagram type. So enjoy this episode, and I will go over a little bit more about what is involved in the next 2. Okay, thank you guys so much for coming out tonight and listening. I don't know what you know about what we're going to present tonight, but I'm very excited to be here.
Absolutely.
And I'll just start by telling you a little bit about who I am, and then I'm going to let Doug tell a little bit about him. I'm going to breathe. But I am a social 7. But I can really find power in the arrows directions, like I can go to my 5 and I can go to a 1 and just access the strength and the energy from those. But I wrote a poem one time, so I thought, I've got a little bit of 4 in me, but the 4 is right next to the 3, and so when that social 7 gets going crazy, I'm on stage and I'm accessing that energy. But then sometimes I look like a 2 because I am a social 7, but then sometimes my 6 wing flutters, and I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing here at all. I'm afraid of everything. But anyway, that's a little about me. Why don't you explain who you are?
I'm Doug, and I'm a self-preservation 9.
Really? That's as good as you can do?
I like to watch TV and eat snacks.
Okay, there's Doug. That's
okay. I'm new to the Enneagram thing here.
I hesitate a little bit when they said dynamic storyteller. It's like, I don't know if I'm going to be dynamic or not.
Well, but you've got to know, if you've invited a 7 to do the presentation, so this is what you're in for tonight. I'm not sure about the content, but we will have some fun.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for letting us share this. What we see is a part of our journey into understanding that we're truly one humanity expressing ourselves in different ways at different times. And most of us are familiar enough with the Enneagram to have heard the phrase, we are all the numbers. But we express ourselves differently at different times. So what we're going to do tonight is try to talk about what we see is the evolution of love.
Absolutely.
Since it's almost Valentine's Day.
Apropos.
And 2 people that don't celebrate Valentine's, but
every day.
Well, we celebrate it every day.
Every day.
Yes.
That's right. We'll
so
get to that later.
This is our story, the evolution of love.
Absolutely. And, I'm sure in the crowd tonight we have some people that are very pragmatic, so they may already be asking, what's love got to do with it? What's love but a secondhand emotion?
Love is a many splendored thing.
Love hurts.
Well, love is a battlefield sometimes.
When a man loves a woman,
You give love a bad name.
why do fools fall in love?
Because it's just a crazy little thing called love.
Then love lift us up where we belong.
Okay, I think we've had enough of silly love songs.
So, just to conclude, what you're saying then is all you need is love?
All you need is love.
Love is all you need.
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 Love is all you
Love
need.
is all you
Love is all you
need.
need.
Yeah. Okay.
Set the tone.
Yes, we're going to talk about love tonight. I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, we are not here just to be the comic relief for the night, but I will tell you, I'm going off script just a little bit. I used to, well, as everybody does, I'm sure, have an alter ego that you like to dress up like, right? No? No? Okay, well, I do.
Yep.
Her name is Miss Peach, and she's a crazy, sassy Southern belle. She wears a black lace dress, but the key to my success with her is the dark sunglasses that are bedazzled and bejeweled and the feather boa and all that, but it's the sunglasses. And when you can't see into my eyes, I can turn it on and ad-lib and be as entertaining as possible. But, for me to be up here in front of you as myself,
Yeah.
breathe deep.
Okay.
I'm going to have to refer to my notes. That's all I'm saying. So I've got my notes here, and I'm going to try to stay on script for the rest of the way.
We're already on page 2.
I know, this is amazing.
You're doing great.
I know.
Yes.
Whew. I need Jillian to do some Reiki for me. So what I'm saying is we're here to share how we see the evolution of human consciousness. And obviously this is a conversation that we can't fit everything into in the time we have, but we want to talk about how we express and manifest our understanding of love as we evolve.
And the other thing that we would say is, Danae and I love to goof around and have fun. I'm so glad I'm married as a 9 to a 7 because she brings great fun and joy into so much of what we do. But the other side of this that we do want to talk about right off the bat is that in 22 years of marriage, we have raised a blended family. We have been through our own journeys where everything is not fun, everything is not joyful and giddy. We have had situations in raising 4, and we've had to make decisions that are very difficult to make, such as when one of your teens gets a DUI, do you go to the jail and bail them out, or do you let them stay there for a while to learn their lesson? And even more serious than that, to have to sit down with one of the other teens and decide that it is time for you to go to rehab. So while we have fun in life, and by the way, they have now gone from teen to 34 to 42. So we've been down a lot of roads, and we're here to tell you that we survived it. And not only that, we are excited about the way the journey turned out and what we had to go through to navigate that journey. So we don't want to leave the impression that just because we're going to have fun along the way, that we haven't been through the wars and in the trenches. We've lived some real life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to say that we're a blended family implies that we're a second marriage. So right there, that tells you we didn't have all the tools that we're going to talk about in younger days.
That's
but
right.
what we did know early was that we did need help, and we needed to find some tools. So Doug and I decided early on that we were going to go to a parenting class. And so...
For blended families.
Yeah. No, it was for raising teenagers.
Well, both of which are impossible. But
Well, either one, yes. But yes, so we went to this class, and we were sitting there all ready to be, empowered with the right information. And this guy gets up, and he tells us, I just want to talk about the struggles of raising a teenager. And he said, for example, I have a teenage daughter, and every morning it's just a battle of wills because she sets her alarm and then she turns it off and she goes back to sleep, and I always end up having to go in her room and wake her up. And we were like,
woo.
And?
Wow.
And the rest
How
of
do
the
you
story,
do it, dude?
he was like, yes, they will test you. And we're doing that thing where you're like nudging.
Not our kid.
It was like,
Yeah.
are we on candid camera?
Right,
Because
right.
this is not our world. This is
Exactly.
So
A little more serious.
we did decide that we needed to find another way, another tool.
Exactly, and really tools is what we're going to be talking about tonight. We are going to talk about Enneagram as a tool and a model. We're going to talk a little bit about spiral dynamics. That's the work that I'm mainly involved in with the things that we do in our nonprofit. Tools are what help us navigate for 22 years, and what we've found is the more tools we can find to help us with our life conditions, our challenges, etc., the better life gets, the better the relationship with the kids and the grandkids and all walks of life, really. It's all about these tools. So we want to talk about them from the standpoint that they're like a bit like a map where you know, okay, you are here. That's good in the middle of chaos, right? It's like, where am I? What's going on? Where am I headed?
You know, at the mall.
Yeah.
I am here.
Yeah, I've heard they do that.
Yeah, you don't know.
I don't know what they do at them all. And but the one principle about this is that all of this does require change.
Right.
You do have to change.
Yes, it's inevitable. We are going to go through life changes, and the better equipped you can be going into these situations, then the better you will navigate the road.
Yep.
And that is, so if you read a description on any of the socials, I posted this on Instagram and Facebook and mentioned that Doug and I use both of these tools which he mentioned. One is spiral dynamics and the other, of course, is the Enneagram. We have also, we're very much in favor of therapy and whatever tool comes into your life that works for you. But for the sake of tonight, we're going to talk about the spiral and the Enneagram. Yeah. And what I want is, how many of you, just a show of hands, are familiar with what spiral dynamics is?
Okay.
Great.
Good.
That's wonderful. But for those of you that are not, Doug has been studying this for years and years. And so I'm going to ask you to give a 10-minute overview of 20 years of study.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. If any of you have ever tried to do a presentation on Enneagram or sit down to explain to anybody the Enneagram, it's like, where do you start, right? Well, typically you're going to start with the basics like the types, but you know that there's a tremendous amount of complexity that you just keep going down further and further with instincts and triads and motivations and stances, and you just keep going down, and the more you're able to get into the depth of it, the more that tool can function for you in a multiplicity of ways. The same is true of spiral dynamics. So I'll try to keep this like 10 minutes, and when I'm finished, just so you'll know where we're headed, Danae and I will then go forward where we're going to give examples of the way that these two tools can integrate and work together. So that way it may increase your appetite to expand your reading and the type of tools that you may want to use. So I would say, first of all, that spiral dynamics is recent to the scene as a model, and that's because it deals with big data and worldviews of cultures, worldviews that humanity globally has gone through from the beginning of our recorded history to today. Spiral dynamics, therefore, is dealing with collectives, groups of people, and the worldview that those groups of people share. The Enneagram is dealing more with the individual and with what are all the aspects of an individual. And we're going to draw that out more as we go along as to how that works and the way these two complement each other. But the people that are in spiral dynamics and actually started in the 60s with Dr. Claire Graves, who began doing research of thousands of interviews with people, and he went back and looked at the philosophers of the last 150 years who were noticing that humanity has been evolving in consciousness in specific ways that relates to these worldviews that I'll explain in just a second. Dr. Graves' work was followed by a gentleman named Dr. Don Beck, who literally wrote the book called Spiral Dynamics. So if you're interested in taking a look at that, Dr. Beck, Dr. Don Beck, and the book is Spiral Dynamics. And it will give you a more in-depth look, just as if you were to read a multiplicity of Enneagram writers who dig deeper into the various aspects of the Enneagram. And I'm very appreciative of Don's work. As a matter of fact, one of the things he's most famous for is that he used spiral dynamics in consulting work that he did with Nelson Mandela in South Africa. In fact, if you've ever seen the movie Invictus, the movie Invictus was about how Mandela used the national rugby team, brought blacks and whites together, and used sports as a way to help unify that culture, that nation. And that was part of Don's work with Mandela. So spiral dynamics is used in financial fields, education, politics, a lot in politics, and all across the world when you have country conflicts. So real quickly, you have what is known as the first tier levels, and those are the ones we'll concentrate on as a way to step into spiral dynamics. And I'll go through those. There's 6 levels, and I'll give you just a little snippet of each one, and then you and I will motor on.
Yep.
So, first of all, humans, of course, started in what Spiral knows as the archaic level. And in the archaic level, we as human beings were just really trying to survive on the planet. We were trying to find something to eat on the one hand. On the other hand, we were trying to make sure that we didn't get eaten. So in archaic, that is really just our basic survival instincts. And all of these levels, as they grow, as you will see, are within all of us. For example, if some person walked in here tonight with some type of threat, we would all go archaic in a minute. We would be trying to figure out what to do, how to survive if they were coming in with some kind of a threat. Well, the next worldview that happens that's in the collective is the tribal age. In the tribal age, the collective is primarily made up of a biological or genealogical family or group, an extended family. And so the tribal age is one that is known, for example, in their religious artifacts. They're very much into the magical. So an example of that would be volcano gods, ocean gods. If I were to bring that tribal viewpoint or worldview out to today, it would be parts of the world where they may still participate in things like voodoo. That is that magical view of the tribe. You have a tribal elder, a tribal spokesman, and everyone in the tribe knows what their role is, and that is handed down from generation to generation within the tribe. Now in history, as tribes expanded in their population, or they had some drought in their area and they had to move from where they were, they began to encounter other tribes. When that happened, we entered into the warrior era. In the warrior era, you have 2 different tribes, both of whom think their view of the world and the way you do things is the way you do things. Now they're in conflict about who is right. And in the warrior age, it's a bloodbath. It's chaos, it's warlords, it's feudal kingdoms, Genghis Khan. It's that time of history when the tribal era is trying to expand beyond just the biological ethnicity of your own specific tribe. So then you have this warrior era that comes. Now after the warrior era, people get tired of the bloodshed. That life condition becomes unworkable. The chaos is something that does not naturally work for us as humans. And so we enter into what's known as the traditional era. That traditional era started millennia ago, and as we'll talk about tonight, it's alive and well today, right here in our country and all across the world. The traditional era was when law entered into society. So religiously, think of the law and codes and right and wrong. In the traditional age, in the traditional viewpoint, this is a lens through which we see our values. Right and wrong is a big deal. Who's right and who's wrong. Eventually, with people we talk to that are in the spirituality community, that can be interpreted as saved, lost, and other types of right, wrong, which side of the law are you on? So law and order is a real big deal, and that brings in the traditional age, empire and institution. That's stability. That's fixed. We have an empire. We feel safe and secure within the empire. We also have an institution that's generally some type of religion, and all of those are set up with their own codes. Also in the traditional age, you are taught not to question authority. Now, for those of us in this room that are older, that may sound familiar because our parents and grandparents may have held and still hold those traditional viewpoints about questioning authority. So you did not question Caesar. You did not question the Pope. You did not question the priest. You were a loyal subject of the empire or the institution. And that's the traditional. I'll leave that there. Then the last two that I want to talk about are modernity. What happened with the traditional is you stay in that literally for centuries and millennia, and people are tired of the restrictive boundaries that those have. You have your vocation handed down. You do the same thing your parents and grandparents did. You're in that traditional mold. And then you do something that you absolutely don't do in the traditional age. In modernity, you question. Modernity is when human beings begin to question. What happens when you question? Well, you end up with a renaissance. You end up with an enlightenment. Those are indicators of humanity entering in the West into modernity. And you have an entrepreneur. What's an entrepreneur do in modernity? The entrepreneur asks questions. Isn't there a better way of doing agriculture than with this donkey and plow? Isn't there a better way of getting around other than a horse and a buggy? Isn't there a better way of making clothes other than weaving them by hand? And so you get in modernity a questioning mentality. That is not something that the traditional age likes because it leads to real problems for that traditional worldview when a guy like Martin Luther shows up in modernity. Luther shows up in modernity, and what does he do? He questions the Pope. Now he's doing something that people have not done before. And when he questions, what's the next thing that happens? People begin to protest. They see that this questioning has exposed things that are a problem, unhealthy, if we will, use that language, and then we end up with protesters and Protestants. And so we have this whole Protestant movement that is a product of modernity. Now, after modernity, or while we're in modernity, one final thing is that this is when science really takes off, and scientism. Because science discovers in modernity, through Galileo and Copernicus, guess what? The sun doesn't revolve around the earth. The earth revolves around the sun. In the traditional church, what's the traditional church say? You're a heretic. You're apostate. Because, see, they have fixed boundaries. They have handed those down. They have taught a certain way. And if science says the world wasn't created in 6 days, then the traditional view is going to say that's blasphemy, etc., etc. And so we get the idea that in the traditional view, their understandings are more fundamental, and so we might use the word fundamentalist as possibly a descriptor of people in that traditional viewpoint. Modernity is so focused on efficiency and technology and science, and what my worldview is what science can prove and nothing else. And don't bring that religion in there because we've already proved that's a bunch of baloney, and what I'm going to believe in is what science can show me. And after X number of years of that, up into probably the last 30, 40 years, we've now entered into the last realm I'll talk about, which is postmodernity. Postmodernity is when humans begin to say, you know what? I know modernity has brought me all these wonderful inventions, and it's made life a lot easier in this way and that way, and I do understand a lot more about the way nature works and science and the universe works, but what about human values? Whatever happened to human value? Now, we don't want to go back to the traditional age for our values. Those were too constricted and restricted. So in postmodernity, things become very important to us that have to do with things like gender. How about women? You know, traditional age says that the only authorities that can be in charge of our institution are males, and they're all male hierarchy. Wait a minute, what about females? Is this what we really believe? That it's a male hierarchy that has all the authority in these kinds of institutions? Or we look at the issue of race. And so we're saying, wait a minute, why do we have these things that are there's so much injustice that's happening, and it pertains to a particular race or group of people? And other things that they look at, and the hottest topic that we deal with in our nonprofit is the advent of what do we do regarding LGBTQ. That is a hot topic. Why? Because for the pastors that come and visit with us, and we're not associated with any religion, by the way, we just strictly do consulting on this stuff. Pastors will come and say, I'm with a group that's very traditional, and I personally don't hold the views that I used to hold, and I have more expansive views than I used to have. How do I move my group forward? How do I keep my job and still believe in something that is greater than what I used to believe in? And so in the postmodern age, we get hashtag Me Too, hashtag Black Lives Matter, on we go. That's postmodernity. One final thing is that you will often see something like the bumper sticker that says coexist, and you have all the different religious symbols on it. That's the interfaith movement. The interfaith movement is what you get in postmodernity. When you're in the traditional, like when you and I grew up, you went to a church and they were it. They had the truth. Your church had the truth. And your job was to defend the truth. And that truth was in a box. And you did not go outside those boundaries. So all of those things work together for a collective worldview. And you could be in the traditional worldview. You might have people in your family that go to what you think is a very conservative church, let's say. They could be a 9, a 7, a 5, a 6. You see, they can be any number. Danae's a 7, I'm a 9. We have gone from the traditional to modern to postmodern, and trying to have a more integral view. So our views have evolved. The people in the traditional world would say we devolved. But we believe we've evolved, and our numbers stayed the same. So what you have is a situation of understanding when you're talking to people, they have a worldview. And not only do they have a worldview, they also have a number. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the evolution of love and how does that work with the worldview and the number.
Right. And so, thank you. That was a great overview. That's a lot of information.
Yeah.
I've got a handout that we're going to give you towards the end, so you didn't sit here and read it all while we're talking, which is what I would do. He mentioned we're the first tier, and you just said the word integral. So when you get the handout and you see, wait a minute, he stopped at postmodernity, what is this up here? Well, it's a whole more
That's another presentation.
Thing. It is. But what is important to see is how evolution has broadened our views. We've gone from an egocentric, where it was me, I need to survive. We've gone to ethnocentric, where we had our tribal communities. And the planet is evolving towards a world-centric view. And this is important, I think, to understand that what we talk about when we talk about the levels in the Enneagram is that we start out needing tools for survival. That's our human instinct, is how to survive. So the mother-child bond is all about survival. Talk about Thanksgiving before I move on.
Yeah, who was it that did the presentation on Thanksgiving?
Emily. Well, holidays, yes.
Holidays, okay. So if you were here for Emily, I'm assuming that the reason you did that is because we all know the potential for disaster during the holidays. And we also know the anxiety that the holidays can bring. So let me use a spiral dynamic Enneagram example of, say, Thanksgiving. Okay? So we now know that we're all getting ready for Thanksgiving, and the whole family's going to be there, and our extended family's going to be there. It probably I wouldn't think it would be that troublesome if you knew that Aunt Danae was coming, and Aunt Danae's a 7, and she's going to socialize with everybody at the house, and she's going to like to joke around and have fun, and then after we eat, she's probably going to want to play a game. Okay, that's not a big deal. Or Uncle Doug is a 9, so you know Uncle Doug, he'll come in and say hi to everybody, but he'll probably get his food and go down to the basement and sit and watch the game on TV. Okay, that's not really things that create a lot of anxiety.
Right.
Now let's look at worldview. In worldview, here's the conversation. Okay, everybody, Uncle Joe's going to be here at the table this year. Whatever you do, don't bring up politics. That's a worldview.
Right.
Okay, everybody, Aunt Mary's going to be at our Thanksgiving. Whatever you do, don't bring up religion. That's a worldview. It's independent of what Aunt Mary's number is or Uncle Joe's number is. Those are worldview conversations, and that's why we have to understand that we are all products and we all have a worldview. And by the way, it's just like in the Enneagram, Spiral calls this concept center of gravity, because I might have a postmodern worldview when it comes to this set of things, and I might be quite traditional when it comes to this type thing. So I have somewhere within me a center of gravity. But as we found out, the more we learn about Enneagram types and the more we learn about the levels and the lenses that people look through, the more productive it is and the more we're able to navigate those conversations and know how to contribute to other people rather than be in conflict.
Okay, I know that was an abrupt stop, but we ended up recording for an hour and a half. So what we did was break this up into 3 30-minute segments, or about 30 minutes. So I hope you found this very informative. If you have questions, shoot me a DM through Instagram or Facebook page and let me know what might not have been clear to you, but perhaps the next 2 episodes will fill in some of the blanks. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you next week.